From Kern Government Television, welcome to this week's Kern County Board of Supervisors meeting, originating from the County Administrative Center located at 1115 Truxtun Avenue, Bakersfield, California. Kern County's vision is to create and maintain a customer-centered county government designed to garner the confidence, support, and trust of the people we serve. Today's Kern County Board of Supervisors meeting will convene momentarily.
Board to reconvene. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Supervisor Peters.
Here.
Supervisor Scribner.
Here.
Supervisor Maggard.
Here.
Supervisor Couch.
Here.
And Supervisor Perez.
Here.
Thank you.
Good morning and welcome to the Tuesday, April 13th, 9 a.m. meeting of the Kern County Board of Supervisors. We'll begin today's meeting with a flag salute led by Supervisor Zach Scribner. Following the Pledge of Allegiance, please stay standing for a moment of prayer, silence, or meditation, whichever you prefer.
Salute and pledge. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, I would like to call on Nick Cullen, Director of the Animal Services Department, to introduce our Pet of the Week. Good morning, Nick.
Good morning.
Who do we have here today?
This morning, this scruffy-looking doggy is Dudley. Dudley came to us less than 24 hours ago, actually.
Oh, man, brand new.
Yeah. Well, everything's new to him right now. But he's probably about a 3 to 5 year old Maltese mix. He's just adjusting to life in the animal shelter and outside of it in the board chambers. But he's a sweet boy. And he's starting to calm down now, and his true colors are coming through. But he's a good boy. He's going to make somebody a really cool family pet.
Absolutely. He seems pretty calm. Mm-hmm. So about how long until he's available for adoption?
So he'll be available for adoption on Thursday, but he can go home on a foster today. So we usually seek foster for the animals that come in the shelter to minimize the time that they're in the shelter.
Awesome.
So if somebody's willing to take him on a temporary foster while we try to find his owner, he can go home. Otherwise, he'll be available for permanent adoption on Thursday.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Nick.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Mm-hmm. The County of Kern has provided notice that as a result of the declared federal, state, and local emergencies due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and in light of the governor's orders, this Board of Supervisors meeting is not physically open to the public. Testimony and general public comment are accepted via email or voice message to the clerk of the board's office prior to today's meeting, and live comments via teleconference will be heard during the meeting. We will begin by considering the consent agenda. All items listed with the CA above the item are considered to be routine and non-controversial by county staff. Consent items will be considered first and may be approved by one motion. If a member of the public wishes to comment or ask questions regarding an item on the consent agenda, they may do so prior to a vote being taken. A member of the board may remove an item from the consent agenda, and it will be considered in listed sequence with an opportunity for any member of the public to address the board concerning the item before action is taken. A member of the public may also comment on any closed session item. At this time, I will read the consent agenda item numbers. That is items 1 through 6 and 8 through 10 on page 2, items 13 through 17 on page 3, 18 through 24 on page 4, 25 through 31 on page 5, 32 through 36 and 38 through 40 on page 6, 41 through 47 on page 7, 48 through 53 on page 8, 54 through 59 on page 9, 61 through 67 on page 10, 68 through 74 on page 11, and items 75 and 76 on page 12. I would also like to note that items number 7 as well as item number 60 have been withdrawn by staff. Madam Clerk, are there any members of the public wishing to speak to the consent agenda?
No, Mr. Chair, there are not.
Okay, thank you. Are there any board members that would like any items moved for discussion?
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I will abstain from the following items, item number 62, 63, and 64, because of my wife's employment with Adventist Health. Madam Clerk, if you could please record my abstention on each of these items, even though I will vote on the motion to approve the consent calendar. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Scrivener.
Motion on consent.
Second.
Okay, please cast your votes.
Thank you. The motion is approved. All ayes.
Great. The board will now consider item number 11, public presentations. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons that wish to address the board on any matter not on this agenda, but under the jurisdiction of the board. Board members may respond briefly to statements made or questions posed. They may ask a question for clarification, make a referral to staff for factual information, or request staff to report back to the board at a later meeting. Also, the board may take action to direct the staff to place a matter of business on a future agenda. Speakers are limited to 2 minutes. Please state and spell your name before making your presentation. Madam Clerk, are there any members of the public wishing to speak?
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, we did have one member of the public register to speak under public presentations this morning. However, I don't have any callers in the queue, so that person has not called in. I can monitor Teams, and we could hear that person if she calls in prior to the adjournment of this morning's meeting. Otherwise, she can also call in this afternoon at 2 p.m.
Perfect, thank you.
There are no other speakers.
Okay, we'll consider item number 12, board member announcements and reports. And I would like to begin by asking Bryn Kerrigan, Director of Public Health Services, to provide an update on the COVID-19 pandemic.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board.
Good morning.
Today is an exciting day for Kern County, as the state will announce that Kern County has met the orange tier metrics for 2 consecutive weeks, and Kern County will officially move to the orange tier effective tomorrow. Specifically, our adjusted case rate this week is 3.2, significantly decreased from last week at 5.3. And to hit the yellow tier, it needs to be below 2, so we're well on our way. Our testing positivity rate this week is 2.2%, down slightly from last week at 2.3%, and it needs to be below 2% in order for us to move to the yellow tier. And our health equity positivity rate is at 2.6%, down from last week at 3.4%, and it needs to be below 2.2% to move to the yellow tier. Effective tomorrow, the following changes are allowable in the orange tier. Retail no longer has capacity restrictions. Museums, zoos, and aquariums have indoor capacity increases from 25% to 50%. Places of worship have indoor capacity increases from 25% to 50%. Movie theaters have indoor capacity increases from 25% or 100 people, whichever is fewer, to 50% or 200 people, whichever is fewer. Hotels and lodging can open indoor pools. Gyms and fitness centers can increase their indoor capacity from 10% to 25% and can open their indoor pools. Restaurants' indoor capacity increases from 25% or 100 people, whichever is fewer, to 50% or 200 people, whichever is fewer. Wineries, breweries, and distilleries can open indoors at 25% capacity or 100 people, whichever is fewer. Bars are now allowed to open outdoors only with modifications. Family entertainment centers can open indoors at 25% capacity or 50% capacity with all guests showing proof of testing or full vaccination. Card rooms can open indoors. Offices can be open indoors with modifications, but they're still encouraging telework. Outdoor live events with assigned seating can increase capacity from 20% to 33%, or 67% if all guests show proof of testing or full vaccination. In addition, the state has added guidance related to gatherings, private events, and indoor seated live events to the Blueprint for a Safer Economy. These additions are all effective tomorrow. The gathering guidance changes from a maximum of 3 households indoors to a maximum of 50 people outdoors, or 25 people, or 25% capacity in settings where capacity limits exist indoors in the yellow tier. Private events such as conferences, meetings, and receptions are now allowed. In the yellow tier, private events can occur outdoors with a maximum of 100 people or 300 people if all guests show proof of testing or full vaccination. Indoor seated live events and performances are now permitted to occur. Capacity restrictions vary based on the size of the venue and allow more guests to attend when attendees show proof of testing or full vaccination. Last week, the governor announced a plan to retire the blueprint for a safer economy effective June 15th. This movement will be determined based on two criteria: vaccine supply and disease burden. Based on a state conference call, vaccine supply will be based on the availability of a vaccine appointment within 2 weeks of an individual deciding to get vaccinated. And disease burden will be measured on new COVID-related hospitalization admission rates and hospitalization rates for those who are fully vaccinated. Should the blueprint retire, the state has indicated that they will be lifting the stay-at-home order, and we will move to a focus on risk-reducing guidance without limitation on which industry sectors would be permitted to operate. Our Fairgrounds mass vaccination clinic continues to thrive. Last week, we administered 10,078 doses, which is our busiest week yet. This week, our drive-through component of the Fairgrounds operations opens. We plan to administer 17,550 doses at the Fairgrounds this week. Last week, we requested the third-party administrator to relax the vaccine eligibility criteria in Kern County ahead of the April 15th statewide movement to all Californians 16 years of age and older being eligible for vaccination. This request was mainly due to our conversations with Kern County residents through our canvassing and vaccine information booths efforts. During these conversations, many of our residents voiced confusion regarding the eligibility criteria. Residents indicated that they were not signing up for a vaccination because they were not clear as to whether or not they were eligible, and in most circumstances, they were in fact eligible. This morning, a joint statement was issued from CDC and the FDA recommending a pause on the administration of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. As of yesterday, more than 6.8 million doses of the J&J vaccine have been administered in the United States. There have been 6 reported United States cases of a rare and severe blood clot in individuals 6 to 13 days following vaccination. All 6 cases are in women between 18 and 48 years of age. CDC will convene a meeting today with the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices to further review these 6 cases and assess their potential significance. CDPH is also convening the Western States Scientific Advisory Committee. CDC has indicated that these adverse events appear to be extremely rare. However, we take the safety of vaccines very seriously. We have informed all Kern County vaccination providers to hold on the administration of the J&J vaccine until recommendation to resume is given by CDC and the FDA. This recommended pause is a result of the vaccine safety review process working. Healthcare providers report all health conditions individuals experience following a vaccination into a system we call VAERS. Experts at the CDC review the reports in VAERS, constantly looking for commonalities in reported health conditions to determine if they could potentially be related to the vaccine. They could also determine a certain underlying health condition poses increased risk from the vaccine for more severe side effects, or that the commonalities are simply coincidental. Vaccine is still one of the safest ways to build immunity against COVID. Being vaccinated is still highly recommended. As of today, the county has been allocated 343,815 doses of COVID-19 vaccine. As of April 11th, 363,891 doses have been administered to Kern County residents. As of April 9th, 136,032 people have completed their vaccination series, which is about 14.8% of our population. 121,961 doses have been administered to our 65 and older population. 53,300 persons 65 and older have completed their vaccination series, meaning that 49% of our 65 and older population has been fully vaccinated. Over the past 3 weeks, our vaccine allotment has fluctuated. Kern County will receive 25,310 doses of vaccine this week. Last week, Kern County received 39,450. The week of March 29th, Kern County received 28,910 doses. Statewide, all counties received a reduction in their vaccine allotment this week. This reduction was due to a reduced supply received from the federal government by over 33% from the previous week, and the contamination issue from the Johnson & Johnson manufacturer that wasted 15 million doses, which caused a 95% reduction statewide in J&J doses from last week. If we continue to receive vaccine at the rate we're receiving doses this week, it will take 37 weeks to get the rest of our 16 and older population fully vaccinated. In addition, there's been some recent interest in obtaining antibody tests. Pretty much all urgent cares and family practice doctors' offices can have an antibody test run. Urgent cares welcome walk-ins. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Kerrigan. It's funny that in California, they're limiting capacity on houses of worship still, but card rooms can be fully open indoors. Go figure. Well, I really appreciate it. I'm really excited that we're moving into the orange tier. I know that's no small part due to efforts of you and your department. So I'd like to give you guys a big hand for that. I really appreciate it. My only question is, as far as the vaccines we're administering right now, how are we going to be impacted by this Johnson & Johnson delay? I mean, is that going to keep us from vaccinating anyone that's asking for the vaccine right now, or do we have enough of the other two to cover that?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we were already anticipating a decrease in our Johnson & Johnson supply. We were only anticipating about 3,000 doses this week, so it will only impact our allotment by about 3,000 while we hold on to those doses and only use Pfizer and Moderna.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Maggard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Kerrigan, for your report. It's very heartening to see that we appear to be turning the corner on this, and all the metrics are going on our favor. We're grateful for that. Would you say that our hospital capacity is fine?
Supervisor Maggard, through the chair, currently our COVID-related hospitalizations are very low, and we do have sufficient hospital capacity at the moment.
Thank you. With the pause with Johnson & Johnson, what does that do to, as I recollect, Cal State Bakersfield, Cal State University Bakersfield, they were using Johnson & Johnson significantly more there than other places. So what does it do to those? Do those shut down now, or do we share our vaccine with them? How does that work?
Supervisor Maggard, through the chair, the CSUB Mass Vaccination Clinic actually has an allocation of Pfizer vaccine that they're receiving through their multi-county entity allotment. So they're going to stop using the Johnson & Johnson vaccine until it's recommended that they can start using again, and they're going to switch back to the Pfizer vaccine, which they were using up until Friday of last week. All of our other vaccination providers typically have a mixture of Johnson & Johnson and either Moderna or Pfizer, so they'll just hold on administering their Johnson & Johnson vaccine for the moment.
Thank you. One of the issues I'm concerned about is the hesitancy amongst some to take the vaccine. So if, I think you said 45% of our 65 and older population has received the vaccination. In fact, I think they're full, both doses, I think, right? So that means 55% either haven't taken the shot or for whatever reason they may not be planning to take the shot. What are we seeing around the state in other areas, and what might we do to make people aware of and incentivize them to go down there and get that shot? Because it protects all of us once more and more people have the shot.
Absolutely. Supervisor Maggard, through the chair, we are seeing that some people do have some level of hesitancy, but we are trying to make ourselves available to them to answer any questions that they may have where they're at. So we have our vaccine information booths that we launched in some areas that are more vulnerable populations frequent, staffed with bilingual nurses, so they're there to answer any questions that folks may have, and then also just to open the dialogue with them so that we can help encourage them to get vaccinated. We do have quite a few individuals that have their first dose of their multi-dose series and that maybe have delayed getting their second dose, so we've also done some texting outreach to those to remind them the importance of getting their second dose so that they can be considered fully vaccinated. There is some fear out there about the side effects being more severe for the second dose, dose than they were for the first dose. So we're trying to answer any questions that they may have about that second dose sort of fear that may be out there. And then what we did hear was that there was some hesitancy to getting vaccinated because people didn't understand the eligibility criteria. So we did everything that we could to overcome that barrier, and we saw a significant increase that week in people getting vaccinated following that change. So we're trying to get out there and listen to our community and understand what may cause them any hesitancy to getting vaccinated and overcoming what that hesitancy is for them.
How was the level of participation in those health equity neighborhoods where we have tried to reach out to make sure that particularly people in poverty and people of color are participating? So are we seeing any difference in the level at which they're participating?
So we are seeing that the Hispanics and the African Americans are getting vaccinated at lower rates than what their population represents here in Kern County. So we are trying to do some targeted outreach to specifically those ethnic and racial groups to ensure that we're getting the vaccine to them where they're at. And then also for the quartiles, we're doing a fantastic job here in Kern County vaccinating those that are in that quartile 1 and that quartile 2, those lowest quartiles, which make up a majority of Kern County. We're seeing very high rates of vaccination. We're seeing it about equivalent to the population representation here in Kern of the vaccination rates.
That's encouraging. Last question for today, if the color coding criteria the governor has been putting upon us, if that's to go away around June 15, what happens if we reach the yellow stage prior to June 15? Do we just roll right into it, or are there any implications to that?
So Supervisor Maggard through the chair, just like with the orange tier and the red tier, we have to remain in the orange tier for 3 weeks, meeting the yellow tier metrics for 2 weeks before we can move into the yellow tier. The yellow tier would be the final stop for Kern County until those restrictions were fully lifted on June 15th.
So it may be early to mid-May before we reach that level anyway.
Correct.
Okay, well, I just cannot thank you enough for the diligence of everybody involved in the process, and I'm just so proud of you and the effort that you guys have put out. And of course, we want people to be vaccinated and safe and survive this. So I'm confident that we're doing all we can in that regard. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Maggard. Supervisor Perez?
Thank you, Chairman. We had a vaccination event at a church really targeted at the African American community. Of course, everybody's welcome, and we had every group come, I assure you that. But we did have folks show up in taxis and take buses to get there. So what is your sense about the transportation issue? Is that rare? Is that something we need to be thinking about? Because I do have a concern about it, and then I want to talk separately about Hall Ambulance and their engagement. So if you could address that issue first, please.
Absolutely. Supervisor Perez through the chair, we do understand transportation is a barrier that we see here in Kern County. So we do have transportation services that individuals can call and make an appointment for their vaccination at the fairgrounds. They can then call a separate number and make an appointment to receive transportation to and from their appointment at the fairgrounds, free of charge to them.
Very good. And we're communicating that, advertising that piece so folks know.
Absolutely.
And that's specifically to the fairgrounds?
Correct.
Very good. Okay, thank you. I received a call last week from LaVon Hall, who leads the Hall legacy currently, and she had seen the operation for Sunday on television and wanted to contribute and wanted to help, which was really incredible to get these kind of calls. They're rare. And she brought out a medic unit, and we needed to use that medic unit that day, which was really nice. So it really was extraordinary. Hats off and a heartfelt thank you to the Hall team and family for making that possible. LaVon is an incredible woman. So she was curious about her potential involvement moving forward on the transportation piece as it relates to having an ambulance out in the community with us if we do mobile clinics out in some of the hard to reach communities that I've walked door to door in, and it's tough, I'll tell you. It's a rough crowd. I've walked precincts for 20 years and it's rough.
Absolutely. We can definitely reach out to Hall Ambulance. It would be nice to have their participation. We have talked to them about, utilizing their paramedics and their emergency medical technicians to do the observation component at some of the mass vaccination clinics. We have sufficient staff currently, but as we expand our operations, we're definitely going to need to expand that staffing, so maybe Hall can help us out with that effort.
Well, she was very interested in doing her part, in particular in our most vulnerable communities. They showed up on Sunday. They were, consummate professionals and really added to the gravitas and credibility of that operation. And I'm just so grateful for that. And to see members of the community stepping up. But she indicated that she wants to be involved moving forward, making sure that we, leave no stone unturned. So let's think about incorporating them and their big hearts into this operation. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Perez. Supervisor Couch?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Bryn, for your report. I think having a hesitancy to get a vaccination, almost of any kind, is a pretty rational reaction, especially when all I got to do is pick up my phone and there's probably an article on there right now that says 3 people had an adverse reaction somewhere. Can we do some sort of an effort that says, to put those in context? I think that's helpful for people, because I think, could you go back into your notes and look and see how many people had an adverse reaction? I think you said they were all women. There were 6 people. That's nationwide?
Yes.
Out of how many doses, roughly?
6.8 million.
And do you know what the extent of the negative reaction?
These 6 people is fairly severe, which is why they are doing the pause on the vaccination so that they can do a review.
So it's severe blood clots. Okay, so it's rational for people, I think, because number one, you've got 3 vaccines to choose from. You've got all this information about, well, how old do I have to be and where do I have to go and all this other stuff. And then on top of that, you've got the news wants to talk about bad news, frankly, is news. So I think it's helpful if we continually put into context the negative reactions and frankly, the system's working if you get any sort of negative reaction, even among that many people, that few a number of people with that many doses.
Absolutely.
I don't know what we're doing in regard to get out sort of the other side of that story. But I think that's important. But that, and by the way, I want to tell you something. It's always nice when one of the most important things that we do, I think, is put people in the right positions. And it's always nice when we put someone in a position and then we see them perform the way you're performing. And I just want to compliment you on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Couch. Are there any other questions for Ms. Kerrigan? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other reports or referrals from the board? Supervisor Perez?
I would like to welcome Kathy Kraus back. You complete us. So it's good to have you home.
Absolutely. Okay, well, seeing no other reports or referrals, we'll now consider item number 37 under Employers Training Resources and Education and Workforce Development presentation on B3K, Better Bakersfield, and Boundless-Kern. So I will now turn it over to Teresa Hitchcock.
Good morning, Chairman Peters, members of the board. It's my pleasure to bring before your board a presentation regarding the B3K initiative. But first, before Kristen Watson with the Kern Community Foundation and Nick Ortiz with the Bakersfield Chamber begin their presentation, I would like to provide your board with a little background information on this initiative. In April of 2020, B3K launched as a collaborative effort among business, government, and civic stakeholders to jointly create and deliver a shared economic growth and opportunity strategy and investment plan for the Bakersfield-Kern region. B3K stakeholders are committed to aligning economic development efforts throughout the county to maximize the impact in advancing a common agenda for regional prosperity with quality job creation that is enduring and accessible to all residents. A critical piece of the B3K process is an evidence-based market assessment that has been developed to guide informed decisions and foster critical problem-solving conversations as community stakeholders work toward identifying strategies and tactics to address identified gaps and strengthen collaboration. A part of the initial effort is to develop an operational and investment plan with shovel-ready projects designed to meet community needs and encourage investments from a variety of federal, state, and private investors. This effort is envisioned to be an ongoing process with a long-term goal to strengthen community infrastructure and capacity to proactively address gaps impacting economic prosperity in the Bakersfield-Kern region. Today, Kristen Watson, Nick Ortiz, and other key stakeholders in the B3K process will report on the progress of this effort. Therefore, it is recommended that your board hear the presentation, and I will turn it over to Kristen Watson and Nick Ortiz at this time.
All right, well, good morning, Chairman Peters and members of the board. I'm Nick Ortiz with the Greater Bakersfield Chamber, and appreciate the opportunity to brief you and to be joined by really our great partners in this initiative. Next slide, please. So this morning, what we plan to do is provide an overview of that market assessment that Teresa mentioned, give you a little bit more brief background on B3K and the initiative's leadership, give our co-chairs, our B3K leadership an opportunity to provide their perspectives, and then also hear from our research partners on the analysis and implications of the market assessment, and then finally hear how we are turning that analysis into action to try to improve economic outcomes and economic development in Kern County and Bakersfield. So next slide, please. Kern County's economy is at a crossroads, and that is not something that I have to tell your board. It's something that you grapple with every single day. As you know, there are areas of our economy that have seen great job creation over the last decade, but the reality is that we're now losing ground to competitor regions. And a couple of the data points out of the market assessment are that more than half of the residents in the Bakersfield-Kern region struggle to make ends meet. And less than 20% of the jobs in our region are good quality jobs that provide middle-class wages, benefits, and upward mobility. And now my partner, Kristen Watson, will take the next slide, please.
Thanks, Nick. So really critical that we really put our arms around this idea of quality jobs. So as Nick indicated, we have less than 19% or 19% of our population in those quality jobs. Those quality jobs are what we use to determine self-sufficiency. Those residents that are in family units that are not accessing social services, that's what one of the main criteria of self-sufficiency or good jobs, quality jobs are. If we wanted to look at moving 50% of our children and 80% of our adults who are currently in that non-sufficient or insufficient job category, if we wanted to move them into a quality job, we're looking at growing or upgrading. And it's really important that we identify that this is not about bringing 100,000 new jobs in, but perhaps really looking at retooling and upgrading existing jobs. It's a combination of two things. So those 100,000 new jobs is a target.
Next slide, please. So when we talk about those struggling workers and we talk about struggling residents, one of the things that's important to note is that many of them are actually actively working. And so one of the issues is that these folks are trying to do their level best to get ahead, but they're in that struggling category because they find it difficult to obtain one of these quality jobs. And so what the research shows us is that age, race, educational attainment all impact the likelihood that a worker will struggle or be able to find one of these quality jobs. Next slide, please.
So this information, while probably not surprising to many of us on the call, it still is been incredibly valuable for us to be able to see it in a disaggregated way and really see how it is impacting the residents throughout the region. Another piece that is very telling is when we compare ourselves among peer metro regions. And we can see that educational attainment is an area where we really are lagging behind our competitors. If we look at the far left-hand column, that's Bakersfield, and we can see that we have the largest percentage of workers with that are limited to a high school diploma or less. And we also, conversely, have the smallest percentage of workers with an associate's degree or higher. We've been able to kind of hide behind that a little bit because of our reliance on technical jobs in the energy field, but that is changing, and you're going to hear more about that in just a little bit. We really need to focus on how do we grow a labor pool that is skilled and meets the needs of our future workforce. Next slide, please.
But I think the region's future can be different, and that's really why we want to engage in this effort. You know, imagine a Kern County that's the undisputed innovation hub for carbon management and renewable fuels, not just innovating the next generation of energy, but really allowing our traditional energy industry to continue to thrive. That we're leading the state's commercial space exploration strategy. We've long had a prime role here, but we are facing threats from other regions, the Central Coast, just our neighbors to the west, and places like other states like New Mexico. That the city of Bakersfield might become the go-to destination for back office services, second headquarters, and outsourced business services. That we can actually leverage our strengths in logistics and value-added agriculture to spur more advanced manufacturing in the region. That we not just grow entrepreneurs, but provide resources to sustain and grow their businesses. And then finally, because we can see that there are equity gaps in people's ability to succeed, that we close those equity gaps in a really Kern County way by growing opportunity overall. Next slide, please.
So as Teresa mentioned earlier in the introduction, B3K is a really unique effort in that it's a public-private effort. It's a collaborative effort that really is designed to develop a roadmap, but probably, I mean, the big idea is what does the future of the region look like, and how can we all come together? How can we own what that future looks like, and how can we proactively address it instead of seemingly react to some of the headwinds that we seem to be facing. B3K, we're very, very fortunate. We have the County of Kern, the City of Bakersfield, the Bakersfield Economic Development Corporation. We have CSU Bakersfield. We have the Kern Community College District, and of course we have the Chamber and the Community Foundation, all coming together to really roll up our sleeves and see what needs to be done. We're very, very fortunate in that we have, from early on, been able to lure some amazing, very well-respected thought partners into this process. And I think I've shared this with many of you, but we are the envy of many regions from around the state, and I'm sure other parts of the country, in that we've been able to access and rely on our friends at the Brookings Institution, who have extensive experience in this type of work, and are really to be commended for their ability to not just come in with a cookie cutter approach, but to really come in and get to know the community, get to know the region, and really spend a significant amount of time developing the relationships, the trust, and also looking at both not just the quantitative data, but the qualitative data. I hope that people, as they read that market assessment, really understand the layers of data that are involved in that. Next slide, please.
So the purpose of B3K, and the reason that it's, I think, really serendipitous timing, is to kind of align and harmonize existing efforts. It's not to provide some type of overlay or overstep. It really is to provide alignment amongst existing things that are happening. So at the county, you all, under Teresa's leadership, are undergoing an update to your comprehensive economic development strategy. At the city's developing its first ever economic development strategy. And then on a statewide basis, I mean, take it for what you will, but the state government has indicated a desire for regions and local areas to have more autonomy, more control over their economic development decisions in future. And so what we see and what really the value of B3K is aligning all of these so that we're all building off of the same analysis and data, and then all working towards a kind of shared strategy and tactics that build upon each other, that bring success for the entire region based on the individual actions that are taking place across all of the partner organizations. Next slide, please.
So following today's presentation, we will be publicly releasing the much anticipated, long-awaited market assessment. We recognize that not everyone has the appetite nor the energy or time to read the 117-page document. And so as a result, we've also put together an executive summary and a few other collateral pieces to describe some of the more salient points that are contained in the market assessment. Those will be available on the B3K website. They'll be distributed publicly. And we're in the midst of translating them into Spanish so that they'll be available. The idea is that we want this information to be accessible to not just the folks around the table, but to residents and community stakeholders at every level. Next slide, please.
So up until about a month and a half ago, we really operated B3K on a consensus-based model. We were going through the research and discovery phases, but now as we transition to thinking about strategies and the long-term success of the initiative and economic health of the region, we've kind of transitioned in two ways. One, we have these co-chairs, these three co-chairs, who you'll hear from in just a moment. And then we also are developing work groups around those areas that I previewed earlier on in the presentation. And you can see, and I won't list off all of them, but we have great people who are extremely talented and skilled in their fields leading these work groups. We have 5 in total, 4 that are totally up and running: aerospace, energy, business services, and then business ecosystem and entrepreneurship, whose lead you'll hear from later in the presentation. But at this point, we'd like you to get a sense of the perspectives of our B3K co-chairs. And so we'll be switching or transitioning the presentation over to them. And at this point, if you'll change the slide, I'd like to introduce Connie Perez Andreessen, who one of our co-chairs, who's the Chief Administrative Officer with the United Farm Workers. Connie?
Yes, thank you, Nick. Good morning. And thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. I'm excited to be a co-chair along with Dr. Selesny and Greg, and to assist in closing equity gaps through growing opportunity. Given the data presented in this market assessment, future economic development interventions must include intentional efforts to address race and gender gaps in access to quality jobs and economic opportunities. Regions that are more economically inclusive are also more competitive in growth and industry. Inclusivity is at the core of B3K, and we cannot lose sight of the importance of bringing quality jobs to the region's residents. We must design workforce development activities and improve existing efforts to specifically address talent needs, while proactively ensuring access to all communities within the region. There's an imperative to ensure that regional strategies benefit and uplift existing residents, rather than just attracting skilled workers from outside. We must also include community and worker voices in economic planning. There's a tremendous need to expand access to leadership tables and ensure that the full diversity of our community is represented in strategy and decision-making. Now I'd like to introduce my colleague, Dr. Lynette Selesny with CSUB.
Thank you, Connie. To Supervisors, I want to thank you for this opportunity to talk about and the B3K effort. I will focus on 2 areas with B3K effort and a significant impact on our university and our region: increasing the educational attainment and expanding research and innovation. First, the economic success of individuals, families, and businesses correlates closely with the density of talent in the region. No economic development strategy can change long-term outcomes in job quality, vitality, and competitiveness if the region does not dramatically improve educational attainment rates at all levels. We will not be able to achieve inclusive growth or decrease the number of struggling families in the region without addressing our talent gaps. B3K provides irrefutable evidence that we simply must come together. Educators at every level, business, government, and community stakeholders to improve educational attainment through certification programs, apprenticeships, and traditional higher education opportunities. And on expanding research and innovation, regional innovation is a driving factor in thriving regional economies, and we simply must expand our regional research capabilities to ignite new ideas and inspire creative problem solving while building a quality support system for regional entrepreneurs. Historically, CSUB has allocated limited resources to support institutional research, but efforts are underway to shift that trajectory as we explore the possibility of building innovation hubs to undergird targeted industries. Now let me turn the floor over to my colleague, Greg Bielli.
Thank you, Lynette, and thank you, Connie, and everybody for participating in this. I also want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the entire board for your continued interest and involvement with this effort. The headwinds faced by the traditional drivers of the economy are not going to relent in the near future. So a focused and sustained effort towards growing and diversifying the economy is needed. At the same time, we have to reform how we support economic development in the region. Our region lacks a shared vision of economic development success and the structure in place to ensure we're making progress towards the meeting of that vision. That is at no fault of any one organization. Solving it requires a collective approach. The market assessment isn't just doom and gloom. It identifies areas of real strength where we can not only grow current industries, but build new capabilities, but also be leaders in innovation, as you've seen. We are so often reacting to Sacramento. As you know, the state's climate policies disproportionately impact our region and economy. For a variety of reasons, including actions and engagement by you, the Board of Supervisors, there is a willingness to listen to our area's concerns and a room to advocate for investment and policies that improve Kern County, obviously tempered by the fact that the state's environmental policy is on a particular trajectory and barring significant changes will stay at that path. I'm invested in the success of B3K because the private sector leadership is critical to moving this effort forward. Tejon Ranch has been willing to step up and lead many times to support the growth of the county's economy base. Advanced Kern initiated out of here, a regional branding strategy initiated out of here, and also infrastructure advocacy. We all believe that it's time for all of us to embrace this effort and have the community dialogue on a new direction for economic development for our region. Now I'd like to introduce Merrick Gutman with the Brookings Institute, who will provide more details, but brief, review the data that went into the market assessment.
Thank you, Greg. Greg knows my notoriety for being from DC and filibustering. So I'm going to try and cover a good amount of information in summary basis of that complete market assessment, and also that these slides are providing you, if you could advance to the next one, providing you with some context back up to the one that says B3K market assessment, some context going forward that you can refer to, supplemental to the executive summary. So again, the objective for me today is to kind of explain or distill some of our research that led specifically into findings that I'll be focused on, that on which these work groups, these strategy work groups, and supplemental groups around continuing research, performance metrics, and accountability, as well as deep prosperity, addressing some of the points that Connie made, carry forward into implementation. And JP Lake, after me, will describe a little bit about how those findings have translated to his work leading the business support and entrepreneurship section. So the first thing is to just restate what this market assessment is and what it is not. It is to address the points made up front, to establish a clear, candid basis that's in evidence with a lot of data and also qualitative analysis on which people can make decisions. Promote what Greg said, which is a shared understanding of where the economy works well, where there are opportunities, and then where there are serious challenges, so that people can make choices about strategic trade-offs when we all know that there are limits in terms of resources and time available, and to coordinate efforts more effectively so it's not fragmented or working at cross purposes, leaving gaps or having redundancies. What the market assessment did not do is evaluate particular program activities or organizations delivering economic development contributions in the region. It was about the overall system and outcomes that we're seeing in terms of the economy and where to focus going forward to yield the best opportunities for job creation and access, emphasizing that point about quality jobs to address the serious self-sufficiency, economic mobility challenges identified in the early phases of the market assessment. Next slide, please. So the process we went through, there was a quantitative section, a qualitative section, and a lot of stakeholder engagement leading into these work group formations. Before we even undertook the research and discovery phase, there was a lot of organizing of very diverse stakeholders, not simply the organizations or individuals who have economic development in their title, but all the contributors across workforce, private sector, innovation, small business support assets in the region. From that base, we started to undertake a quantitative analysis looking at an enormous number of indicators and trying to figure out the story behind what was happening and where the region should go, including a distinctive approach to looking at job quality and access assessment. We also did more than 100 what I'd call substantive contacts, at least one with each of those individuals through interviews, focus groups, etc. And we did a deep inventory of previous strategies to see what they addressed, whether they were actually acted upon and what that resulted in, as well as a wide range of existing programs and initiatives in the region. And then finally, obviously, the point made before that there's a lot of stakeholder engagement and organizing across public, private, community, higher ed sectors in order to provide these insights and ground truth what we found. Next slide, please. So working off of that basis, one of the key underlying points for the overall initiative is establishing what constitutes economic success for the region. And there are three principles that are being addressed through B3K, through the research and then the action on the other side that results. One is the traditional view of economic development and how people are being held accountable, organizations held accountable, which is job counts, that there's growth happening in the region, which is obviously very important and an underpinning of all economic success. However, the other elements of economic success are required to take into account prosperity or productivity of firms so that they're generating higher quality jobs and you're competing on the kinds of innovation and quality activities versus low wages and cheap land. And then who benefits from jobs, and are the jobs that we're investing in enabling people to be workers and their families to be self-sufficient and not rely on government transfers, and make sure that all participants, it's accessible to all members of the community, because we do see very substantial differences in terms of demographics by race and by gender in terms of your ability to make ends meet and enable self-sufficiency in your families. So these principles addressing growth, so job counts, but also job quality and access, are the framework in which we're operating from the analysis and the action. Next slide, please. The research and action also orients around 5 elements that are drivers of economic competitiveness. You'll see that broken out in the market assessment. The core 3 that can be really influenced is a focus on traded sectors. Those are the kinds of industries, goods, and services that are all sold outside of the region versus locally serving activities like we're delivering healthcare to residents or selling each other cups of coffee. That's really important and fundamental in terms of bringing new wealth and new money into the region. And those are where highest quality jobs are created and support additions in locally serving jobs. The other 2 primary areas that are already mentioned are by Dr. Zelezny in particular is the innovation base in the region that enables those kinds of traded sectors to thrive, and the talent base. So that because talent is the #1 and #2 factor for site selection and expansion questions by the business community. But it's very fundamental. The other aspects are infrastructure. It's an enabler. It doesn't create new economic development opportunities by itself. And governance is how the private and public sector and all of the actors that are dealing with this work together effectively. So, findings. Next slide, please. There were a couple of cross-cutting findings that are really important to set for that apply, whether we're talking about sector-specific activities or any other kinds of efforts. The first is that when we think about the metropolitan area as a cohesive economic entity, because Kern County's jurisdictions are bounded, both Greater Bakersfield and East Kern. The analysis showed that those are actually really different economic centers that perform distinctly in their industry focus, their talent base, what they do. So if we were actually drawing functional economic areas, not by political jurisdiction, which is how statistics are organized, then really the county would be split into one metropolitan area that is on the western half of the county and another metropolitan area with relationships that dip down into Palmdale, Lancaster more than they relate to each other across the county. That's just important to recognize because even though you're responsible as an administrative and political unit for the entire county, there are different kinds of interventions and activities that are going to be distinctive between East Kern and Greater Bakersfield regions in terms of effective outputs and activities. The second is that workforce obviously underpins everything, and that's a core function that the county leads on, organizing and financing. And that there are opportunities, even though the workforce system is, compared to a lot of other places that we deal with in California and outside, have some real strengths, that there is also a tendency to focus on opportunity filling. So the job quality is less important than the job opening and placement. That's the way things are measured. And also, there's not a really good tie between these higher quality jobs and sectors that we've identified and what workforce is doing in order to bolster that and relate to it. So there are opportunities there that are being dealt with within each of the work group themes. And then the final one was a point already mentioned when we look at the analysis, and you can review this. There's real differences in who's accessing quality jobs and opportunities. And so consideration in all of these needs to be given there because we're dragging the economy potential down by not maximizing the entire human capital that's in the region. And we need to do some specific things because there are particular barriers in place in any region that have these outcomes that are disparate among gender and race. Next slide, please. So you see in the market assessment breakdowns of opportunity sectors, opportunity industries that are concentrating higher quality jobs and that are important to the region because they drive a lot of job creation. So just want to outline here that there are a lot of layers to what we looked at in terms of this question, where would you prioritize economic development activities and why we chose particular sorts of work group focuses. It's that layering of start with what are traded sectors versus locally serving, where we have strengths, where we position in the value chain, and have global market trends, all the way down to things that we really emphasize that are distinctive around where talent adjacencies are between areas of opportunity within the region, but off of our base, what the innovation is, and the outcomes around job quality and opportunity. So this is a much more detailed and layered approach to figuring out opportunity areas and opportunity industries than the more general, do you have a particular concentration in a region? And you'll see as we go forward, we emphasize areas around energy, aerospace, certain subsectors of advanced manufacturing and business services, and then also these kind of non-sectors, generic supports that are lacking in the region compared to others of similar scale for entrepreneurship and business expansion, versus the big sectors that are also foundational here in agriculture and logistics. This is just an example. Next slide, please. Example of how we mapped out innovation capabilities, and you'll see some of this is hard to read, but in the market assessment itself, you'll see that there are categories of strength. Not great compared to other regions. This is not a region that's generating tons of new innovation and research or transferring it to commercial activities. So that, to Dr. Selesny's point, needs to be a finding in generally about investing in those activities. But those fit into areas of strength that the region's already known for in terms of geology, engineering, et cetera. So we do see some opportunities there as an analysis. And next slide, please. This is just an example of how we broke down concentrations of job quality by educational levels across the highest level of sectors. So you can see that there's a really, really distinctive distribution of job quality based upon what the sectors are. And you can thereby make choices about how to target areas for growth that tend to generate better quality and accessible jobs. Next slide, please. I'm now into the sections about where we target particular industry areas, and I'm just trying to be very brief here. In energy, obviously, this is a sector that's being buttressed by both regulatory and market forces. And the question for us became, where are there opportunities to build on the existing DNA, innovation, and talent base in the region so that energy can continue to be a strength, leverage what is present, find new opportunities for existing workforce, bring in new investment, et cetera. And we determined based on that tiering or that evaluation that showed up front around the clusters, that the best opportunities here, which require investment and new innovation center efforts, is in the expansion of the existing renewable biofuels activities, relate to other potential around renewable fuels and energy production, and what has become very hot over the past couple of months, even though we kind of saw this emerging as well at the early stages of the market assessment, was the question about carbon capture and how to utilize carbon. On the right side, this just shows the impact. That chart shows the impact over the past decade on the traditional tradable oil and gas cluster activities. And so we're trying to deal with that and preserve strength that exists in the region through focus on those categories. Next slide, please. Questions have emerged specifically about renewable energy generation, in which the county leads, our solar and wind activities. And what we did was evaluate the opportunities in durable quality job creation in that category. It is obviously a strength and probably will be a continued strength for the region, but the number of jobs that are being created that are long-term jobs are not anywhere comparable toward the oil and gas industry and some of these other activities around renewable fuels production and carbon capture potential. So we recognize the importance of renewable energy production, but the impact on job creation, also imperative for job creation, mandates looking at these other categories of opportunity for the kinds of outcomes that the county wants to see. And those are, again, based on talent adjacencies, convergence of existing innovation and emerging innovations, and trends around global industry and public policy and financing opportunities in those other categories I mentioned. Next slide, please. We also took a look obviously at, you won't be surprised, aerospace and its significance to the region, not just East Kern, but some overlapping into other parts of the county and opportunities for the other parts of the county to take advantage. As I think that somebody, I think it was Nick, mentioned, aerospace is globally competitive niche, but under extraordinary competitive pressures, new competitive pressures. And it's also not maximizing the value that exists in East Kern in terms of other commercial opportunities by tapping the federal assets there effectively as in other places, because we don't really have a functional cluster strategy. We have branded it as a cluster, but we don't have an activity that is industry-led delivering that. Next slide, please. So the categories of activities that we're looking at in terms of that aerospace area is increasing commercialization through very specific tactics that are evident in peer regions, unlocking to the right some of those indicators of innovation turning into economic benefits. Ensuring that the talent pipeline with a lot of activity churning is coordinated and really better connected to industry, which is a gap clearly identified. Some enabling policy like the issues that are state-based around expansion of the Mojave Airport spaceport infrastructure, and this question about maximizing our visibility all the way from China Lake down across the border into Palmdale to benefit the entire region and the assets in East Kern, because without looking at that as a comprehensive functional unit, then we're not able to compete against the other major economic regions in the United States and internationally. Next slide, please. Very quickly, there are certain categories of advanced manufacturing that have been improving against trends without a ton of focus and support in the region. You can see that it varies on that chart on the right. And there are opportunities for bolstering that effort by really focusing on it, both in the workforce side as well as the economic development activities. So we're starting to explore what those tactics would be. But we saw that there's potential here that is untapped through the analysis. Next slide, please. And then this question about business services and professional services. The region is underperforming based on its scale in terms of activity around business and professional services. In fact, it's been on the decline. And to be competitive in the current economic mix that other regions of similar size and power have, then we need to bolster those kinds of professional and business service activities. And there are opportunities, including particular examples in the region, that are tapping trends around outsourcing, onshore outsourcing, and other functions. This is just important as well in terms of the talent base, because digital skills are required that are applicable across other industry areas in the region. And our analysis, as you can see in the more detailed market assessment, shows we're really underperforming in the production of digital skills and meeting existing demand. So this relates to both a sector as well as other performance indicators that are going to benefit other activities within the region and be accessible, generate higher quality and accessible jobs again. Final set of slides, 2 more, please. Next one is really about the business dynamism and entrepreneurship support performance in the region. What we see is that the region actually generates a lot of entrepreneurial activity, but it's not creating durable jobs that are growing over a period of time. And so that is indicative of several gaps that in the basic support systems that are available to businesses, young businesses in the region, and particularly young businesses that are knowledge-based and traded. There is a difference that I think JP will go into between that and entrepreneurship for local serving, which is also really important. We just generated some new analysis that wasn't included in the market assessment that also shows that women-owned and non-white owned businesses relative to the proportion of population and compared to the other large metropolitan areas is also underperforming. And while all regions kind of underperform in that, there are clearly, if we're underperforming regions that are underperforming, a focus on that and tapping that potential is really important. So next slide, please. So those are the fundamentals that led to the work that JP has been leading based on the analysis, translating into very specific tactics, which will lead to performance measures and an operational plan to implement these efforts that respond to these opportunities. I will stop now and turn it over to JP to talk about an example of how this market assessment has been translating into action.
Thank you, Merrick. I hope everyone can hear me, and good morning. This is JP Lake. It's a pleasure to be presenting to you this morning, supervisors. As Merrick mentioned, I am one of the chairs for these 5 work groups that have been formed. My work group got started back on February 18th. I have 14 fabulous people that are on this team, and they comprise a selection of entrepreneur and small business support organization representatives, a couple of entrepreneurs in their own right, members from our education community from CSUB and Bakersfield College, as well as a representative from the Grimm Family Education Foundation and a number of others. Since February 18th, we have had 5 meetings, and we're heading into our 6th meeting this coming Thursday. Our work has been focused on 3 different phases. The first phase was a review of the market assessment and an analysis of that data and some additional inquiry that resulted, for instance, in some of the new data that Merrick just mentioned around how are our non-white and women businesses doing. And so that work supported and confirmed a lot of the data that is in the market assessment around what I call a very strong spirit of entrepreneurship in Kern County, as evidenced by the rate of new business formation. That's a very encouraging fact to have at the foundation of this area of innovation. Unfortunately, where we are falling short is in this area of durability, or what oftentimes you'll hear described as the survival rate. The survival rate of new businesses in Kern County after the 9-month period is very low compared to our economic peers that Brookings has identified in the market assessment. So our goal in our work group is to develop a set of tactics and an action plan to improve that rate of survivability. Ultimately, that's what it's all about. The second phase of our work was to develop some initial strategy ideas and tactics. And I'm pleased to report that right now the group has identified between 18 and 20 potential tactics, and we're now working through those in our third phase, which is building out detailed action plans around the highest impact ideas and tactics from that list. In our work, we've identified 5 areas that are a priority for focus. And those are, number 1, and these are not in any particular order, but number 1 is capital. We developed a problem statement around each of these focus areas, and we've spent some time trying to envision a desired outcome for our community. So in the area of capital, the problem is that it's much harder to raise capital in Kern County than it is in our peer cities. If you're a startup, access to capital is a problem. Our desired outcome would be that capital is available for all types and ages of young firms, and that those firms are seeking the capital and they know where to find it. The second priority focus area is what we call our ecosystem. And our problem statement is that there are gaps in mentorship, coaching, and technical assistance for firms across the business life cycle in Kern. Our desired outcome would be that we have at least one well-supported or developed resource in each quadrant of the ecosystem map. And it looks like we do have our ecosystem map up on the screen for you. Hopefully you can see that. I want to highlight a couple of areas on there where you see a lot of white space. Up in the top left, under the capital row and the idea stage or MVP column. MVP stands for minimum viable product. It's a term that is used a lot in entrepreneurial mindset thinking. It basically is when you have that first rough idea of a product you can put in front of a customer. We really do not have an accelerator or incubator operating in our community, as you know. You probably also know that there is an effort underway, which I'm also helping with, around an innovation lab with the help of Bitwise. And so that's what's represented there by another name, the Bitwise Founders Cohort. We also do not have enough activity in the area of micro grants or revolving loan funds. So that's just an example there in that first column. As you move to the right, now in the second row, you'll see two white spaces. One of them is labeled Joint Innovation Capital, and the other one is labeled Market Access or Procurement. These are types of support systems that many other communities offer. And when we talk about a Joint Innovation Capital program, that would be a situation where local businesses and industry partners come together and fund innovation, research, development, and help support startups that are addressing needs that those industries have. So in our case, it might be that we would want to develop an innovation fund around these four industry clusters that the market assessment has identified. A mutually supportive effort that often goes along with joint innovation capital is market access or procurement. This would be a way to showcase innovative products and services that new companies are developing and helping bring them to market for those targeted industry clusters. The last one I want to call your attention to is in that third row labeled community infrastructure and space, and it's on the bottom right. We have lots of white space down there, but one of particular interest, I think, is industry-specific infrastructure or tech parks. We've done some initial work looking at other tech parks in other communities. There's various different types of them, but basically this is physical space that is dedicated towards providing co-working or lab or manufacturing space or wet lab space for startups that are developing innovative new products and technology. So this is just an example of our ecosystem map. With that ecosystem map in place, the third area that I want to highlight as a priority focus area is the idea of access. Our problem statement is that the communities outlying Bakersfield are not well connected to each other and to Bakersfield's inner community. Our desired outcome would be that these ecosystem resources are designed to be accessible throughout all communities of the county, either virtually or in person. The fourth focus area is around inclusion. Our problem statement here is that there is a historical and persistent lack of inclusion and understanding of minority plight or viewpoints, especially with respect to decision-making and accessibility. Our desired outcome is that all entrepreneur support resources adopt an intentional approach to inclusion and access, which is structurally embedded in the operation and or is organized and coordinated at a community-wide level. This is certainly a big goal, and it's one that this whole effort will be focused on, and we're looking forward to having the help of the Deep Prosperity Committee, which is also being formed here under B3K to supplement our work group's efforts in this area. And then the last area of focus is around information. The problem is that there's no single entity that has assigned ownership of dispersing communication about resources to young firms and entrepreneurs, and there's no central point serving as the central hub of information. We have some nascent activity there and certainly a lot of promise, but more needs to be done. Our desired outcome would be that the entire community and ecosystem know where to direct an entrepreneur or young firm to for learning about and connecting with available resources. And I think that the saying here is that if any one of us is walking down the street and we run into someone with an idea and they want to start a new company, it would be ideal if all of us knew exactly where to point them to go for that first step. And so that's the essence of this fifth focus area around information. So again, just to summarize, our priority focus areas are capital, ecosystem, access, inclusion, and information. I'm very excited to see the final work plans that come out of my group here. I think we'll be wrapping them up towards the end of this month, and we look forward to continuing to help the larger effort with B3K.
Awesome. Thank you so much, JP. And that's just an example of one of the great work group and the dynamic leadership that we have through this B3K initiative. So I want to thank the board members for your indulgence and your patience with us as we work through this. Appreciate your attention to this. I would be remiss if I didn't close by just thanking the team at the county. Ryan Alsop and Teresa Hitchcock have been excellent partners. Each of these work groups is supported by analysts in Teresa Hitchcock's shop. And without them, we would not be able to push these work groups forward and get their work product flowing. So a huge thank you not only for the partnership, but the real resources that the county has invested in this. So with that, we'd be open to any questions or comments, but again, appreciate your time and attention this morning.
Thank you, Nick. I see Supervisor Perez has a question.
Thank you so much. Hats off, Nick, to your entire team for such a fabulous endeavor for us to embark on as a community, to build community and to engage in the kind of rising tide or be part of the rising tide that lifts all boats. That is what this feels like to me, and I'm very excited about it. I want to say quickly, Teresa, thank you for your continued influence and emphasis on workforce quality. You know my personal opinion that all of our economic growth is tied directly to the quality of our workforce and the perception of our workforce as it exists here and around the country, because these things are gauged, they are measured, and they are significant as it relates to economic development. So this is so exciting. Teresa, you recall, as part of our workforce task force, we discovered that in the next 10 years in California, the million jobs gap is going to require a skill set that's a little more than high school and not a full-blown college degree. There's a time and place for college degrees. When it's possible, we should absolutely promote it. But it is an incredible opportunity for us to think about retooling our actual workforce in order to meet actual economic needs that exist here. So thrilled to see Greg Bialy in the house, Tahone and us engaged on a really incredible new and exciting job training program where we identified, along with Kern Community College District, a 24-hour certificate training program, Teresa. You remember, it was short, it was manageable, it was cheap, and it involved teaching who would be the new folks at Tahone how to count change, pull up your pants, don't fist fight your supervisor, all of these sort of cultural soft skill issues that tend to be, an issue in rough and tumble Kern County. We love that, by the way. We have to address as it relates to the culture of our workforce. And we did that there. We trained 2,000 workers. That launched with an incredible success. And it got us thinking a little differently about how can we look at the reality of our workforce, the reality of who we are, culturally and otherwise, and really meet our workforce where we are so that we are upskilling, uptooling in a way that's affordable and honors the taxpayer, but really looks to the Greg Bialys of the world and says, what do you actually need, Greg? What are you actually working towards? You're the money guy. Tell us where to direct our resources. And Tahone's been such a great partner in that. So Greg, it really is nice to see you at the table. One of the discoveries we made, Teresa, with our workforce task force, and it was through really Mike Turnipseed sending us a study of the 98 largest metropolitan areas of America. In the 98 largest metropolitan areas of America, Bakersfield being one of them, we are the second highest youth disconnected rate. That means between 16 and 24, our kids are neither in school, or those that meet that rate are neither in school and not working. Between 16 and 24. We competed right behind Memphis, Tennessee for the worst kids in the country. Memphis, Tennessee at 22.6, we're 22.2. And frankly, Teresa, the study did not consider rural areas. So if you included rural Kern in our preparation to compete, what you would see is really the worst prepared, worst positioned youth to compete in America. That is, of course, all of our problem. It's an opportunity as well. And with that spirit, Teresa, we launched, Mr. Turnipseed, our workforce task force, along with the partnership of BC, a small little pilot out in Arvin called dual enrollment. And we took freshmen in high school, 30 kids, and dual enrolled them at BC so that they can begin to understand the relevancy of education, the many opportunities before them, be that military service, the trades, be that plumbing. We have a plumbing shortage in America, by the way. That is a disgrace. But nonetheless, we explored with them many, many opportunities at their disposal right here. Sonia, in her incredible visionary leadership, lent counselors out to the Arvin site, repurposed them for the action of engaging young people before we lose them, because we're losing them by around 15, 16, sometimes permanently. And as you know, we're looking at folks decades on the dole if we don't intervene and upskill and give them opportunities to compete and make sense of that. And so what's the flip side? The flip side is that our people are the best people in America. That's the good news, right? Our loyalty index, something that is measured by employers, is through the roof, right? We are patriotic, family people. We are people of many diverse faiths, but nonetheless, we are people of great hope and great faith, and we are humble people that are hardworking. We certainly do not want a handout, but the opportunity to close a skills gap and move our people closer to living wages and, as I like to say, mortgage-paying wages, we must address these issues. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to express what is an obsession of mine, which is the condition of our workforce matches our economic opportunities. That little program out at Arvin with 30 students is now the largest dual enrollment program in the state of California. Launched with 30 kids out of Arvin, a partnership between Taxpayers Association, the 5th District, Teresa Hitchcock, many others. I'm sorry if I don't list you all. Sonia at BC saying, how do we think creatively about addressing a reality that's right here, is that our youth disconnected rate. Not to point fingers or blame anyone. We tried that, Teresa. That didn't work so well. We had to retool and really look at our partners in education as really the most critical piece in how we think about preparing our workforce and how we think about meeting them where they are and advancing them in ways that is manageable, is not overwhelming, is not so expensive as to be cost prohibitive, not just to the individual but to society. We have done that, and I'll close with this. I heard a remarkable speech by a futurist at CSAC that said, for every job lost to automation, 2.4 jobs are created. That's incredible, right? The perspective by which we look at our workforce and how we think about what are always natural evolutions, whether they be in technology, whether they be in energy, of which we are the experts in, we are always in a state of evolution and impermanence. And so the idea that 2.4 jobs can be created for each job loss, to me looks like an opportunity at Amazon in our new BA program at BC to get our high school kids enrolled earlier than any kids anywhere in the state. Dual enrollment, we're the largest high school district in California. We are also now the largest dual enrollment program. Our kids competing for BAs right here at our local community college or right here at Cal State, for the highest paying automation jobs. Why? Because the Greg Bielys of the world, along with all the other really loving, caring, honest, intelligent people here, say we need to give our workers an opportunity to compete, to buy their own homes, to hold their heads up, make their own wages, because I believe that's who our people are, every single one of us. So thank you for the opportunity to look at these issues with fresh eyes. Teresa, you have remained consistent and diligent in looking to workforce as solutions for the future. I see opportunities in those 2.4 jobs. Where are they going to be created? If we come together and the number one logistics, the 5 and 99, with this incredible new opportunities at Amazon, our BA program at our community college, those pieces link together to make real pipelines to a future that makes sense for Kern County and puts us on the cutting edge, right? We always hear about this school-to-prison pipeline. We have a $70 million STEM school at the MLK community. I pose, and in closing, not the school-to-prison pipeline, Teresa, but the school to Amazon pipeline. No pun intended for Kern County. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Perez. I accidentally skipped over the part where I needed to ask for public comment on this. I apologize. Madam Clerk, is there anybody that's called in on this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do not have any public comment on this item.
Great, thank you. Any other comments from the board? I would just like to say I know Dr. Zalesny from CSUB is part of this group. Go Runners. My wife works for CSUB and keeps me up to date on students and providing opportunities for them to grow professionally in the future. When I was part of the Kern High School District Board, we built a new regional occupational center, which is going to teach kids a lot of life skills, a lot of, they're going to be able to learn welding, woodworking, auto repair. And that's really exciting. That's what we need to see happening. But they also need somewhere to go after that. Those jobs need to be available. And programs like this and these types of exercises are fantastic. And I think this is what we really need to see to provide those opportunities for our young kids growing up and in the future to have those jobs and those opportunities that are ever-changing in Kern County. So thank you very much, Ms. Hitchcock, and everybody that's been a part of this B3K group. Okay. Well, having no more items to consider in open session, I will entertain a motion to adjourn to closed session to consider County Administrative Office items 77 and 78 and County Council item number 80. Item number 79 has been withdrawn by staff.
So moved.
Okay, without objection, we are adjourned.
Out of the big